Okay, let's get started. This is the first. Okay, let's get started. I think I'm on now. This is the first of two back-to-back hangouts on air. I'm doing this to wrap up my series during the month of Ramadan, and I'm going around the states of Malaysia, as anyone who's been watching this series would know. And tonight I'm doing, first up is Selangor/Kuala Lumpur, and I am doing Ikan Bakar. Okay, I know that people are going to say, oh, well, Ikan Bakar, you can get it anywhere around Malaysia, which is true, but I am specifically using this for my KL themed hangout because that's basically what stuck with me on one of my recent trips to Malaysia. The crew from Media Prima, which is a TV media conglomerate, took me out to have Ikan Bakar at Tanglin. Okay, this is quite a famous place. And Ikan Bakar just means grilled fish, Malay grilled fish. I don't have a barbecue, so anyone wants to sponsor barbecue for me, I'm all ears, but I'm going to actually pan fry it. Now, I'm just going to get started so that I don't spend too much time talking. And coming up after this, I'm going to wrap up my series, and I'm going to Penang. And with Penang, I'm doing oyster omelette. So if you're going to hang around and watch it, it's one not to be missed because I haven't done oyster. I haven't done this on air so far. I've got over 100 videos. If you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel for all my cooking tips and more on Malaysia, it's just up here on the screen here somewhere. I'm going to post up. Don't forget, it's just, well, youtube.com/JackieMSydney, okay, in case you miss it. But this Ikan Bakar that I'm going to do now. Now, just to get started very quickly, I picked up some barramundi fillets at the fish shop just up the road earlier on today, okay, because I know Aussies and a lot of Westerners basically like their fillets, and I'm going to talk about this as I get started cooking this. Because well, I'm going to do something a little bit unusual. I know, like I said, first of all, this isn't going to be grilled. Bakar means barbecued, basically. This isn't going to be barbecued. It's going to be pan fried. So it's basically already a deviation from what you would expect usually. And also, secondly, pan frying the fish. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make two toppings, okay? Well, two accompaniments to go with it. Usually in Malaysia, with the first one I'm going to make, it's essentially a sambal that you stuff the fish with, okay? And the second one I'm going to make is something that I took away from my experience eating Ikan Bakar at Tanglin. And it's really what sets Malay grilled fish apart from like your regular grilled barbecue fish and that sort of stuff. Really the kind of sauce that gets served with it. And some of them are really quite strong and pungent. And I'm just going to make one of them just to show you what it's like, okay? But like I said, because I'm not using whole fish today, and I don't have banana leaves and that sort of stuff, I'm just going to pan fry these fillets. And all I'm doing right now, I've got to find me some salt. Okay, somewhere. Well, in the absence of salt, I'm going to use my trusty old chicken stock granules. I'm sure they're somewhere. I had salt and sugar up here the other day. Okay, unless the cats took them away. And people were commenting on my previous hangout. They can see cats walking around. They're not mine. But it's not a lot I can do about it because I'm actually at my stepmom's backyard at the moment. So I've just sprinkled a bit of ground turmeric on this. It's going to give it a nice little yellow hue. And also usually a bit of salt, okay? But I've used chicken stock granules on it instead. And I'm just going to heat up a bit of oil. I'm just using my Carotino oil as usual in this pan. I'm going to, like I said, usually if you've got some banana leaves lying around, it's a good idea to just put a piece of banana leaf on it, and that just adds to the aroma with the final product itself. So I'm just putting this on very quickly. I could use foil, and sometimes they do that. But I do in fact actually, this is barramundi fillets with skin on. I do in fact like the fact that, I do in fact like crispy skin. Okay, so I'm leaving this as is, straight on this non-stick pan, cheapo non-stick pan here. And I'm just going to cover this and let this cook. Okay, like I said, now the first of my accompaniments is really something that usually what they would do is stuff the fish with. They, you know, in Malaysia we like to eat whole fish. Okay, we don't generally, not that we don't. It's just, you know, we're not averse to eating whole fish. Okay, so what they would usually do is slice the cavity down the side, take out the, obviously, you know, all the stomach and all that sort of stuff, and then we would stuff the cavity with a sambal kind of filling. Sambal is really kind of like a generic Malaysian term for kind of like a chili onion accompaniment. And I'm cheating again. I'm using these commercial fried shallots. Usually this is actually just dried shallots. I might put a little bit more on, okay? But usually what you would do, because I'm just, one of the things you will take away from my cooking videos is that I try and minimize the kind of effort and mess that you would create in the kitchen, which is why I use a lot of prepared products, okay? So you don't have to be pulling out your food processor, you don't have to be chopping fresh onions, peeling onions, and then blending everything in the food processor like you see in so many Malaysian videos that kind of make people think, oh, Malaysian cooking is too much hard work, so much easier just to throw a roast in the oven. Now I'm just trying to show you there is an alternative, okay, that basically circumvents the need to use food processor. I've got some chili, ground chili here. I'm just putting that in. And I'm going to put some belacan, okay? This is powdered belacan, and I've shown this about at least a couple of hundred times, I think, on air. And of course, you can use fresh, not fresh belacan, but belacan in the block, which is the more traditional way of using it. But this just saves you the trouble of having to slice up a block of belacan and then wrap it in foil and then like roast it until it crumbles. It's all done for you. It's already crumbled. You just pour a couple of teaspoons in there. And I'm going to cheat again. I've got this Malaysian brand garlic chili sauce. It's a little bit sweet, okay? So that means you're going to need to adjust the amount of sugar you would otherwise put in, okay? So I'm using that, so I'm going to avoid putting any sugar in it at all. And usually, again, you would put a bit of salt. I'm using my chicken stock granules, because everyone who knows me knows I love my chicken stock granules. The other thing I'm going to put in is this just canned tomato from a previous recipe. Was in the freezer. I just whipped it out. And I'm just going to pour some in here. Whoops. Okay, it's not completely defrosted yet. And just mix this up. There are lots and lots of variations to this particular recipe. Okay, this is quite saucy actually. So what we're going to do is pan fry this in some oil until it turns into like a chili paste consistency. Okay, what else do I want to add to it? Tamarind. Okay, tamarind just gives it that little bit of sourness. Again, I'm using a shortcut thing. This is just a tamarind concentrate in a jar. Usually they would suggest buying tamarind pulp, and you're going to pour some hot water over it and let it soak, and then you're going to squeeze it out and then get rid of all the pulp. It's just, like I said, effort. And this helps you to circumvent having to do all that. I am just so glad. I just realized that I should check my audio. I had one hangout once where my audio was not working, and I did not realize until after my hangout wrapped up. It was really awkward. Okay, people watching tried to actually notify me by texting me, and of course I didn't see my text until after the fact. Okay, just pouring a bit of tamarind concentrate in there. You can pick this up at Asian grocery stores as well. Okay, this is just, I'm just going to check on this. Coming along nicely. Like I said, if you're just joining me now, these are just barramundi fillets. And all I've done is just rub a bit of turmeric and a bit of chicken stock granules on it, okay? And I'm just pan frying it in a non-stick pan. They're still quite moist because I've kept the lid on. I'm just going to cover it up again. It just needs probably another couple of minutes. And with this, I'm going to put some garlic in this. So let me have a look It's quite amazing that things can go missing when I'm living here. Well, I've been here alone actually for a few days. I'm going to put some lemongrass in this. This is just brown lemongrass, okay? And really, it's the kind of recipe that you can just sort of like what I've done here. Just have a dig around your pantry to see what's available. Some people can put oyster sauce in it. Oyster sauce, I've done a hangout on oyster sauce. It's a very, very ubiquitous Asian ingredient, not necessarily specifically Malaysian, but we use it in a lot of our cooking. You know, it's just one of those really, really versatile ingredients that you know, we can just kind of like just throw in just to give it the extra, just much the same way as chicken stock granules as well. Okay, I'm just cooking this on fairly low heat because I don't want it burning. Okay, so I've got that, and I'm going to pan fry this later on. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to show the dipping sauce. Okay, it's a tamarind dipping sauce, and I'm using fresh onion. Again, you can use the dry one, but I think for this particular exercise, fresh is probably best. Fresh is always best, and you know, the whole point of me using dried and prepared ingredients is just for convenience sake. But of course, you know, in an ideal world, everything would be fresh. And just let me move my audio across. Okay, testing. Okay, hopefully you can still hear me. Yeah, in an ideal world, you know, I'll be picking herbs from my garden, and I actually can because my mom has got a nice little herb garden up the back here, and I'll be planting my own vegetables and that sort of stuff. But obviously, you know, who's got time for all that, especially if you're a busy professional trying to get some dinner organized. Okay, so I've got some fresh onion. I'm just gonna chop it into bits. Ideally, really, you know, red onions or Spanish onions would probably work better for this particular exercise. But this is all I can find in my pantry, so I'm just going with this. And the other thing is I've got some fresh chilies, and this is actually in fact from my mom's garden. And what she very diligently does is she, when she harvests them, she chops them into slices and then freezes them in little ice cream tubs. Okay, so I've got that. Let's check on how this is going. And I'm just going to use this to just, okay, this is just coming along quite nicely. I haven't used a lot of oil in here, so the skin isn't as crispy as you would otherwise expect. Okay, but it is very moist, the way you would expect Ikan Bakar to usually turn out to be. Okay, I'm just going to flip this over. This particular chunk is a little bit big, so I'm just flipping it over. Okay, and like I said, you know, if you wanted to get fancy, you can probably roll that sambal into that and just wrap it up and secure it with bamboo sticks as well. I'm just going to cover this and let this, turn this up a little bit more and let it cook for another minute. And in the meantime, I'm just going to run off and look for my garlic. Okay, now if I've got some fresh garlic here again, and if this is the first time you're watching me, you know I usually use dried granulated garlic where I can, like again for convenience sake, and of course, as I always emphasize, fresh is always best, but you know, if you've got dry ingredients, you can keep them in your pantry for months and months. You don't have to worry about having to rush out to do a, you know, spend 2 hours at your local supermarket hunting down fresh ingredients that you're only going to use a tiny amount of, and then the rest of it's going to sit in your fridge and then go off after a week or two. Okay, so I've got this. This is ready to go. I'm just going to take this out. And like I said, usually with Ikan Bakar, you would stick the paste on top, but because I've really only got one stove, okay, and also usually you either stick it on top while you're grilling, or you would stuff the fish with it, okay. This smells really, really nice, by the way. Pity you can't smell it. Someone needs to come up with the technology. Okay, I'm just going to use the same pan. So this has taken probably about 8 minutes to just cook. I'm just going to add a bit more oil to this thing here. And I've got some leftover from the other hangout I did the other day. Speaking of which, okay, now I'm going to saute the sambal ingredients in here. So turn it down a little bit because it's going to spit because my sambal mixture is quite watery. And I'm going to throw in a bit of garlic as well, okay? And like I said, you know, if you've got dried garlic granules or just ground garlic or whatever, that'll be fine. I'm just chopping this up. Yeah, speaking of which, I've done, this is, like I said, number 7 in my series of 8 hangouts or live broadcasts, as what I call it, outside of Google+. And I've got all this food that I've cooked up during my hangouts still sitting in my fridge because it's just way too much food for me to eat on my own. And some of the dishes are a little bit too spicy for Noah to get into, so it's a bit of a pity. So if anyone lives in my neck of the woods, you know, you could potentially bribe me into joining my hangout so you can actually eat some of this, and you know, in return it'll kind of like validate some of my cooking so you know that I'm not making it up when I say something tastes really good. And speaking of which, if you haven't seen any of my previous hangouts in this series, the one I did last a couple of days ago on Johor, I think was probably the best dish I've made so far in this series. It's really mind-bogglingly good. And it's been a real eye-opener for me as well, just doing this series of hangouts, because I've had to do a bit of research into some of the states and what they're known for. And laksa Johor, I had never actually even tasted, let alone cooked myself, until I did my hangout earlier this week. Okay, this is just simmering along. I want to reduce this into a paste-like consistency, okay? It's taking a little bit longer than I would expect, mainly because there's so much sauce in it from the tomato sauce, the canned tomato puree that I poured in earlier. Okay, I'm just going to taste test this a little bit. It's very nice. It's still quite, you can taste the rawness in the garlic yet, so I want to fry this a little bit just to cook it all the way through. And you want to balance the tamarind. If you don't know anything about Malaysian cooking, tamarind gives it the sourness, okay? And you want a balance of spicy, a bit of sour. You want the pungentness of the belacan, which is, for the uninitiated, basically preserved strip. Like fermented, really, is the word. It's quite pungent. So I'm just cooking this up. It could use a bit more oil because it really should look quite red. And the dried shallots, I would usually soak it in water for a little bit to reconstitute it before I use it. But I'm just rushing through tonight a little bit. So if you're just joining me now, I'm making Ikan Bakar. In Malay, literally, it means grilled fish, okay, and grilled bakar means kind of like barbecue. And because I don't have a barbecue, I'm just pan frying everything. And this is one of 2 accompanying accompaniments to go with this, okay? And I've mentioned before, you know, in Malaysia, we tend to eat our fish whole, and what we would do is, you know, there are lots and lots of different varieties of grilled fish. There's grilled stingray as well, you know, and usually what you would do, this kind of sambal, you would actually spread on top of the stingray, wrap the whole thing in banana leaf, and then grill it, okay? And then it'll get infused with all this flavor as well. But because I'm using just fish fillets, barramundi fillets to be precise, I've actually separately pan fried the fillets, and I'm just going to pour this over the top of it when it's done. Okay. And the other thing I'm going to do, and I mentioned this before as well, is the fact that, you know, the one thing that sets Malay grilled fish apart from, like, say, a Western grilled fish or something like that, or really anything, is all the different really, really interesting sauces and dips that go with it. And some of them are really pungent to the point where I'm not quite game to, you know, take too much of it, because it's quite strongly flavored. Some of it uses preserved prawns, chinchaluk, okay, and some of it uses just different types of very strong flavored Malaysian ingredients. Okay, so this is what it looks like over here. Okay, I haven't used that much oil, so it doesn't look as like oily, shiny as you would otherwise expect it to. I'm just spooning this over the fish. I'm going to take a photo of this at the end so you can see. Okay. And that would take about 10 minutes to cook up. If you're using fresh onions, like usually you would, if you're using fresh onion, that would take a little bit longer, because the fresh onion you're going to actually need to, because there's a lot of liquid in the fresh onion, you're going to need to pan fry it to the point where it dries up and also starts to brown as well, okay? So I'm just going to make the sauce that goes with it. And I'm going to use the tamarind again, the tamarind concentrate. A little bit too much in, so I'll just pour it in, and I'm just gonna add some water to this, and this is just kind of like boiling all these ingredients together. Okay, I've got the onion and sliced bird-eye chilli. Just mix it all in. My belacan powder again, the dried shrimp powder. There's this is actually quite salty, so you just need to keep that in mind when you season this, okay? And a bit of sugar. So it's going to be really pungent, prawny smelling, smells of fermented prawns with a sourness infused through it as well. This is very, very sour because, like I said, I put a huge amount of the tamarind concentrate. And the other thing about these tamarind concentrates you got to keep in mind as well is the fact that the different brands will have different concentration levels. Okay, they're not always going to be the same. So I had this incident at one of my cooking master classes a while back. I'm adding more water because it's very sour. Yeah, where what happened was my recipe was based on a particular brand of tamarind concentrate that I used, but at the last minute I had a sponsor come on board to offer their product, their tamarind concentrate, for my class participants, and the recipe didn't quite turn out because of that, because their particular brand of tamarind concentrate was, whoa, I mean, it was so incredibly concentrated, it wasn't you know, it wasn't pourable, it was like a paste you actually spoon out, and of course nobody took into account the fact that it was going to be a lot more sour than the particular one that I used, which was, you know, actually more diluted than this one that I'm using right now. Okay, but so what ended up happening was that everyone had to adjust all their seasoning just to kind of balance out the flavor. Okay. That's all there is to this, and that's the sauce. And what you would do is just, if you're eating this in Malaysia, at the Tanglin where I had this particular dish, what they do is they grill all the fish on the barbecue in the back of the shop actually, and then they would have like all these different different accompaniments to go with it. and you just kind of help yourself to it. And the other interesting thing I didn't mention as well is they serve this with rice as well, okay? And if you see the picture that I posted online, that's actually where I ate that dish. That's the actual dish that I ate. The rice comes with all these different kinds of like curry sauces. Okay, so you have this big, well, not big, I guess probably a half a dozen different types of curry sauces and curries. Some are vegetables, some are meat-based. And then, they'll give you a plate of rice, mountain of rice really, and then you just say, oh, I want that sauce sort of thing. Some will be like different hues of like brown and yellow and that sort of stuff. So they just ladle it on, and then you go out and then you grab your fish, and that's how you eat your meal. That with the grilled fish and the different accompaniments or the different condiments that go with it, and that's your Ikan Bakar, Malay style. Like I said, ideally, you would cook this on charcoal on a barbecue, but obviously because we don't have that. But it just goes to show this is the flavors themselves you can recreate at home. And also the other point of difference was, like I mentioned, is that usually we use whole fish in Malaysia, okay? And we would smear this either over the top of the fish while it's grilling, and ideally covered with banana leaves, that sort of stuff. I don't have banana leaves here. My mom used to have a banana tree out the front, and she chopped it down. And the other thing is, if they were using whole fish, they might slit it down the middle and actually stuff the sambal with it as well. But there's nothing to stop you just kind of like pouring it over the top at the end after you've cooked the fish separately. So lots and lots of different ideas, different ways of cooking this. I'm going to post the recipe inside this video, just the kind of like general ingredients, and I'm going to post the full recipe on my blog as well. So keep an eye out for that. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, go to youtube.com/JackieMSydney, and I'll have a lot more videos there as well. So check it out. I'll catch you as soon as I clear this up. I'm going to get started preparing for my next hangout, which is on Penang, and I'm doing oyster omelette. I know a lot of people want to know how to make oyster omelette, so join me then. I'll catch you. Thanks a lot.